everything about super glue, well, okay then. I guess you're free to go. But for the rest of you that are going to pretend that I know everything about super glue, thanks for sticking around. Super glue, or as it's actually called, cyanoacrylate. Now, cyanoacrylate was developed by a red-blooded American named Harry Coover Jr., who developed it in the 1940s in an attempt to kill more Germans for the war effort. Now, when that didn't pan out, he eventually sold it to B.F. Goodrich, who then mass-produced it to sell to the American public. Later, Loctite purchased cyanoacrylate and created a superglue empire, which means that most of the superglue that you actually buy, it probably comes from the same place as everywhere else. Now, there are certain brands that make variants of it. So there are thin glues and thicker glues. Both have their advantages, which we'll go over. And there are also different methods of application that we'll go over. Now, you've seen the glue knife method before, but there's also the brush, and there's also a couple others that we will cover. So let's go over what I have here. Now, as I mentioned, most of the world's super glue is the same, whether it's Games Workshop, Gale Force 9, Army Painter, or Loctite or Crazy Glue brand, it's all the same. If you have any familiarity with those glues, you'll know what's in these bottles. Okay, I would consider these medium consistency. They will flow a little bit thicker than water, and they have a surface tension that allows them to bead up, and so they don't run everywhere. They have a cure time anywhere from 15 to 30 seconds, or maybe even 45 seconds, depending on how old or fresh the glue is. They are readily available, inexpensive, versatile. You can use them for a lot of different things. Okay. However, there are some companies making specialty glues, and that's what I have over here. Let's take a look at those. Now, the first of these is Armskeeper's medium glue. It is the same consistency as just regular craft glue that we all know, but it does cure quicker. So if you are getting tired of waiting for the cure time of regular glue, this stuff does cure to 5 to 10 seconds. I did find that to be true. However, that also means that it will dry out a lot faster too. So make sure you put your lid back on, and don't be disappointed if this dries before you even finish the bottle. The more interesting, however, is they're super thin. Now, I was very excited when I saw this because 1 to 3 second cure time sounds really awesome. However, to get that 1 to 3 cure time, it needs to be very, very, very thin. And it is. It's essentially like water. Look at this. Which means it's very hard to control. There's a reason this nozzle is covered in glue and the label is all stained, because this stuff is very hard to control, and I don't recommend it for beginning hobbyists. Even though the option is out there if you'd like to try it, just be careful when you do. The advantage to having a super fast curing glue, or even a glue that cures a little bit faster than normal glue, is obvious. You don't have to hold your pieces together quite so long. If you have really small pieces that are fiddly, they'll bond faster. But the other problem is it can be a real mess. So if you'd like the option, give these a try. I found them very exciting. They do have a lot of other products that I will try in a different video. They have some new glues that do all sorts of wonky stuff, and I'm going to try those out, and I'll bring you guys some info on that at a later time. Let's talk about applicators. What I look for in a glue bottle is a wide mouth. There are some brands that will trick you into buying the ones that have a needle pin of a mouth to the nozzle. Those clog up too quickly and need constant punching so that you can get any glue through. They also require you to press really hard on them, and what you end up doing is you start pushing against a clot, and then it breaks through and you glue everywhere. That's one of the biggest problems that a lot of new hobbyists find, is that they don't know how to apply glue, and hopefully this will help. So I like this Crazy Glue because it's cheap, I can get it anywhere, and it has a wide nozzle. I don't know if you could see that very well. But even after I use my glue, I can stand it up like that, and that wide mouth is gonna drain, and it's not gonna clog so quickly. All right, so that's one of the first things I look for when I buy super glue, is I want a large wide mouth applicator. You can find those also in this Arms Keeper brand, but to a lesser degree. They tend to have a very small needle point, and this one needs to be cleaned up. But what I will generally do with most of my glues is, if they're this much of a needle, what I will do is snip them off. That adds a little bit of a tolerance so that I can have more drainage and it doesn't clog so quickly. So you want a wide mouth, and if you don't have a wide mouth, make one yourself. Another applicator that I find very useful is the brush. Now, this Loctite here comes with what is essentially a fingernail polish brush. Now, this is very useful because you can get the glue exactly where you need it. You don't need to drip it onto anything. You don't need to use glue knife technique. Let me show you an example. So here is a Chaos Space Marine we're going to use for our example. See all these lands here where we're going to place our glue? If you use a normal nozzle glue, it tends to run where you don't want it to. It tends to bead up and gather on the nozzle, because as you're touching it, that glue will collect here in the mouth. Instead, the brush gives us the capability of touching these areas with just the right amount. Now, this consistency is pretty much like what you would find in those other glues. This is a standard medium consistency, but because you have the brush, you can get them in just where you want it. So the applicator is real helpful. So if you find that a lot of your miniatures are getting that glue frosting and you just can't control the flow, try a brush applicator. The other advantage of this is that you can just stick it in there, and even if it's starting to gather at the mouth, it doesn't clog, which is nice. There we go. We don't have any leaking on the side. We have just the right amount. And this is the same stuff that you would buy from the game store for a lot more money. So consider the brush on. Now we're going to be talking about how to apply glue if you don't have a brush, in methods that will help you mitigate that glue frosting, because some of y'all can't behave with the glue. Some of y'all can't be trusted with the glue. So hopefully this helps. Those of you that have been around here long enough will know what the glue knife method is. Essentially, we're going to be taking one of our hobby knives and we're going to be using it as an applicator. So here you see that I have 3 different knives. This is my detail knife, this is my main work knife, and then this one I keep specifically for applying glue. Now, the glue knife method is for when you need precision. So mostly it's going to be for fiddly bits like, say, purity seals. When a lot of people start in the hobby, they start off with a basic medium glue and a fat, wide open applicator. Now, the problem with this is a lot of people get excited and they say, oh, I want to throw on some glue here and attach my purity seal. And so they do a little drop, right? And then they go like this. Now, what is the problem with that? Well, firstly, you end up gluing things to yourself. You end up getting glue all over the front of the piece. And even if you do get it stuck on there, when it actually does stick, you have all of this mess right here. See that? Now with the glue knife method, what we're going to be doing is putting just a little drop of glue on our knife. Now this is a little bit like a measuring cup if you're cooking or baking, because the knife tip will only hold so much. You can spread that on there, then you grab your piece. You don't have a bunch of extra glue. You carefully hold that in place. There we go. See how much cleaner that is? Another instance where a glue knife is really useful is if we have a bit of green stuff that has come off our miniature. So this right here, this little piece of green stuff has come off, which is no bueno. But I don't want to peel the whole thing off and have to glue it, because then I risk having a glue coming out on the sides. So instead, I'm just going to glue this little bit right there using glue knife. So we're going to get just a little drop. Now I'm going to get the knife tip and just stick it under here and run the blade back and forth. Then using the clean side, press it back down so that no glue touches the outside of the green stuff. You see how useful that is? Another and final way to use the glue knife is to use a large drop and then let it turn this way so that that bead of glue starts running down the knife. And you may want to put a little paper underneath just in case. Okay. And then you would put this down in between a crevice, like a hip joint that you're rebuilding, or a small, really hard to reach tight place where you're going to need a little bit of glue, but you don't want glue to hit the sides. So this is very useful to get glue in a very precise place. Now let's talk about the paper method, which is kind of like the poor man's glue knife. If you only have one knife and you don't want to be messing around with a glue knife or what have you, that's fine too. Essentially, we're going to be doing much the same thing. So what you'll need is a piece of parchment paper, not normal paper, because the super glue will stick to normal paper far too easily. This needs to be the waxy baking paper that we use in all of our videos. You need to watch our tools video if you don't know what this is. So you're just going to do a little drop. You're going to grab your fiddly bit and just lightly dip it. Now, this is a kind of a crude method, and you need to be careful. You need to make sure that you're wiping the sides. You don't have any glue coming up over the side, because that will kind of defeat the purpose of doing this neatly, right? There we go. How clean that is. So you can dip using medium glue because its surface tension beads up like that, and you can get a little bit of precision, but it is a little bit of a cruder method. And you do need to be careful not to get glue on your fingers when you're handling your small bits like that. Now you can also tear a little piece, or better yet, cut a wedge like that and make yourself a paper glue knife. And just get a little bit of a bead on here. Okay. Apply that just like you would with your glue knife. Just like that. Now, if you do this cleanly and you do this right, you can press down like that and glue won't be coming out the sides and sticking to your thumb. If you're worried that you're going to have glue coming out the side, then don't press down, just hold it like this. There you go, paper glue knife. So just a couple of methods on how to apply without making a mess and frosting everything. I'll do one more for you. This is the bonus round. We'll need another purity seal. What we're going to do is do a bead of glue on our paper. And do it small, don't do it too much. Then you're going to get a knife with a good pointy tip. You're going to stab the bit. You're going to need to make sure that it's on there fairly well. Then you can dip just the back of it, just enough so that you see the glue hit it. Okay, just like that. And if you think that you have too much, you can kind of wipe some off on the paper. Bring it over here. Bring it over here and stick it on there. You see how I don't have any contact with the glue area whatsoever? Now, you'll know when it's cured enough and when it's dry, when you can pull the knife blade out cleanly. Okay, so I'm going to hold this. So I'm going to hold this on here for just a moment. And I'm going to easily pull the knife blade out. Maybe just kind of work it out carefully. There you go. So that is another method of applying glue to small fiddly bits. Let's talk about some extra products you may want to pick up. One of them is Uncure, and the other one is Instaset. Now, Uncure is a debonder, and what it does is removes the bonding agent of super glue. Now, you may think that this is sort of a genie in a bottle that you can kind of erase all your mistakes, and I wish that were true, but it's not quite that good. Let me show you an example here. The super thin glue has a very common problem of getting all over you. Now, the Uncure, the debonder, is pretty good at removing super glue from your fingers. You get a little drop of this. What you'll do is you'll rub it around and let it debond that glue. But it doesn't just remove it, it doesn't dissolve it, it doesn't just go away. What it does is it turns it into sort of a sludge, right? A sludge that can be wiped away, that can be washed away, but there still is some residual material left over. So why use it? Well, mostly to clean up your tools and your fingers. Because if you use it on a miniature, the results are even less favorable. I'll show you. Let's say that we have glue on our piece of plastic here. And oops, we don't want that there. So what do? We get the debonder and we put a little drop of the debonder on there. What we do is let that eat away at the glue, but we're not out of gel yet. You see how it kind of turns it into a sludge? It's not necessarily a bad thing, because now we can scrape it off and it leaves the plastic fairly clean, but not as clean as we would like. You do need to scrape it off, and it does leave some sludgy glue. So, why do I recommend it? Well, I don't necessarily recommend it for removal of glue on a miniature, or at least not a plastic miniature. Maybe on things like metal, stuff like that, because I actually really like it in case you get any on your fingers and on your tools. And the reason for that is if you're working and you make a mistake and you get glue on your tools or on your fingers, it's a huge pain to have to peel it off and to have to worry about getting glue on your project because you're touching it with glue fingers. So it's actually better for cleaning your tools and your hands more than it is actually the miniatures. Now the second thing it's useful for is cleaning off nozzles. So if your nozzle has a lot of buildup, you can soften this glue with the Uncure and kind of wipe it off. If there isn't a whole lot. If it's built up like this, then mostly what you're going to want to do is just cut that off with an actual knife. So the Uncure is not necessarily magic in a bottle, but it does have its place. The Instaset is real useful if you only have medium glue. Because medium glue takes, remember, It can take up to almost a minute to cure depending how much you have on your miniature. The instant set, however, allows this to cure a lot faster. It's an accelerator. Let me show you. Let me grab 2 pieces of plastic here. Let's take a little bit of plastic with just regular medium consistency glue. Just do a little dab, and we'll see how long it takes to cure. Now, bear in mind, this is fresh glue. This is pretty new, so it shouldn't take too long. You see how I can still move this around? Can still move it, can still move it, can still move it. Now, that's not so much of a big deal when you're working with some extra sprue here that doesn't really matter. But when you're using small, tiny, fiddly bits, like if you were gluing together pole weapons or applying little bits like this, it can actually become kind of a problem when you're sitting there shaking, trying to glue things together quickly. So instead, let's do an example with the Instaset. So what you'll do is you'll do a little drop here. And then what you're going to do is get your other piece and hit it with the spray bottle. Grab that up. And that is fixed pretty good already. So the Instant Set is a great tool. This accelerator really does help with the fiddly bits. Now, something to be aware of, both the Accelerator and the Uncure, they do leave a little bit of a residue. As I mentioned with the Uncure, take a look at our example where I showed you the Uncure, trying to strip off that glue. It leaves this frosty white residue that it's not that big a deal because you can just peel it off with your knife. But if this were to get down onto the chest armor of a Space Marine or down into the detail here, you're not getting it out, and it looks ugly, right? It can also get down into the detail of your little bits. See how it has frosted the purity seals. Now, most of this will disappear under paint. It's not thick enough to really occlude your detail. But if you find that it is more bunched up than you would like, you can also brush that frosting away with a toothbrush, and you can get most of that away. So there you go, guys. It's nice to have these tools on hand. They are not get out of jail free cards. There are some limitations, and there are some things to keep in mind when using them, but they are good tools to have. That should about wrap it up, guys. Let's do a quick review before we finish. So I would highly recommend that you get some glue in a long neck, wide mouth bottle. The cheap stuff is pretty much just as good as the expensive stuff, so if you can't find any of the Gucci brands in stock, don't worry about it. Just get yourself some regular old super glue. I would recommend, however, that you do try the brush, as the brush can be very helpful for spreading a large amount of glue over a wide area with some precision. There are some specialty glues that cure faster. There are some that are extra thin, if that's your thing. I would recommend that you practice those before you commit to them, and have some Uncure on hand to clean off your tools and your fingers. The Instant Set is super useful, especially if you have the medium glue and the Instant Set with a glue knife. You can pretty much do everything you need. So I hope that was helpful. If you liked this video, please let me know down below and share it around. Also, if you're part of the Patreon, you are awesome. And I would like to hear from you on Instagram and on the Patreon page, as well as the Discord. Please jump in there and join us. Thanks.